Good day, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you may be in the world, and welcome to my presentation on aligning the strategy of risk with the strategy of the enterprise, or the true purpose of ISO 31000. You know, ISO 31000 provides the basis for identifying enterprise risk. Identifying risks for risk's sake does not improve the enterprise or prepare the business for eventualities which can have an impact on reputation, finances, people, and equipment, and by extension, the continued existence of the enterprise. Understanding ISO 31000 and aligning the strategy of the risk assessment with the strategy of the business allows the enterprise to identify the inherent value in risk. During this slide presentation, that's precisely what we're going to be speaking about. We're going to be getting into different subjects, different areas, and looking at risk from a holistic viewpoint as opposed from the very narrow. On our current slide, you'll just see a brief outline of what our risk assessment team looks like and who we work for. We are senior consultants and trainers. We have over 30 years experience in the risk community. We are creators of data-driven risk, threat, and vulnerability assessment solutions, and proven leader in ISO. I've been involved in ISO and actually the writing and preparation of standards for some time. So it gives me great pleasure to bring this bit of insight to you and discuss with you some of the value we see in ISO 31000. So you'll see two things before you on this slide. To the right, you see the context of ISO 31000 as a risk assessment process. And to the left, you see what is called the problem-solving process, which is taught at university at most organizations. In the problem-solving process, the first thing that we want to do is identify the problem. In risk management, the first thing that we want to do is identify risk. It's a very, very similar process, just looked at a little bit differently. We call it establishing the context. And in that process, we identify risk by means of conducting a risk assessment. We look at that risk, we identify it, we analyze it, we evaluate it, and then develop a risk treatment for it, or mitigation, to assist in minimizing the impact of the risk on the enterprise or completely eliminating it. So when we're looking at this process in the following slides that we're going to be discussing, I want you to consider risk in that perspective, especially the process of risk management and risk assessment as a means of identifying a problem. So risk assessment is a core process to ISO 31000. You cannot engage in all the follow-on aspects of ISO 31000 unless you have identified risk assessment as a core process. So we should be executive level practicing professionals with a background in risk, protection, emergency management, to a certain extent training, because a lot of times we find ourselves training our clients on our findings and assisting them. We need to know about systems integration, Microsoft product suite or others, web solution, and in essence, be a bit of an industry thought leader. But we also need to have a knowledge of analytics. You know, we live in a society today where analysis and data points and informatics are becoming the language of business. The ability to utilize business intelligence, the ability to utilize existing data and finding that data to make our case in a risk assessment is very important, because this is also data which provides us information that defines and supports the business case. And it's a language that's understood in the C-suite for business. It also allows us the ability to have a persistent risk picture. where we're engaged in a continuous improvement process, not just a one and done, where I come in today, I conduct my risk assessment as part of an ISO 31000 audit, and then I leave and I don't come back. Risk assessment for the client and risk assessment for the auditor should be a persistent process where we re-engage regularly. And what we find ourselves often doing in traditional processes is we re-engage on a schedule, whether it's 2 years or 4 years, and we find ourselves starting from the beginning as opposed to having a continuous risk picture. So to do that, we require business intelligence. Business intelligence allows us a lot of different things. It allows us to identify the value in risk, and there is value in risk. It leads us to improvement of the bottom line of the enterprise, because at the end of the day, whether it's government, whether it's a manufacturing firm, or whether it's some other enterprise, the whole point of being in business is to serve the public or to gain a bottom line. It provides facts rather than subjective information. When we can utilize data to make our business case, we're presenting facts that actually exist, facts that have been accumulated by the business, which help us to paint a very, very realistic risk picture. The other thing is it supports continuous improvement, because utilizing data informatics allows us to demonstrate our success over time and shows how we've improved the enterprise over time. It shows us not just what today looks like, but it shows us what our past looks like, how we got to today, as well as looking at the future and what the future looks like. So in doing this, we have to understand the impacts of risk on the business strategy. Businesses have a lot of opportunity for loss which is portrayed in risk. It generally comes in several areas. Risk to people, lives lost, severe illness, pandemics, financial loss, which can be devastating to a company, depending upon the residual of the company. Look at something even as large as the tsunami in Japan, as well as the recent disaster, the Gulf oil disaster in the United States. These were very large events, but you understand what the financial impact was on the supply chain of these industries. As a result of the tsunami in Japan and earthquake and nuclear disaster, many companies in the United States, including Toyota America, Honda America, Canon America, HP America, saw losses upwards of $42 billion because they were not able to produce equipment and receive critical parts for different types of objects that they produce. The other impact we look at is reputational, and reputation is very important. In today's world, a Twitter post that's negative can drive a stock down significantly. So your reputation, your online reputation, your physical reputation, your reputation with your clients and stakeholders is all very, very important. And equipment, critical equipment that you need to do your job, critical equipment that the enterprise needs to produce whatever it produces. We look at all these different things and we're able to rate them as catastrophic impact all the way to a low negligible impact. This helps us to process and to focus on what is important to the strategy of the business and support the business in a way that they may have not been supported in the past. So the question becomes, how do you accomplish risk audits today? I know a lot of my colleagues are still in what I would call the stone tablet and chisel of the assessment industry. I remember when I first started out, some 25 years ago, I was doing assessments with a clipboard, a notepad, a camera, and I would walk out on site and I would take copious amounts of notes. So, in a lot of cases, a lot of my colleagues are still doing the precise same thing, except they're utilizing a Microsoft Word document or an Excel spreadsheet, a checklist, some template that they've created. And we end up with what I call assessment by the pound. What does that mean? We produce a very, very large and very, very thorough report. Most auditors that I know are very, very professional in what they do and very detailed. And of course, their follow-on reports are very detailed. The issue becomes is your report digestible in the C-suite? Can the executives that you're working for read and understand all the detail that you have? Or do they do like most do, where they read the executive summary in the front, the page and a half executive summary, and then turn to the back of the document to look at the risk treatments or mitigations and what those are going to cost? So I would ask you that as we go through this presentation, you take a different look at risk assessment and risk assessment as a data-driven process as opposed to a paper-driven process. So in a corporation, in an enterprise, in a business, we have cost and value that's hiding in information silos. And these are information silos that are common to most businesses. The information silos are very important because they hide data. Things like IP and brand protection, investigations that may be ongoing or occurred in the recent past, the ethics of the company, regulatory compliance issues that they may have that are above and beyond the audit itself. So, whether you're talking about food safety or medical safety or manufacturing, they all have different regulatory issues. We have to look at safety and occupational health and safety. Issues around business continuity. How is the business going to continue in the face of a disaster? And what is their preparation and plans, policies, and procedures as a result of that planning to support a disaster? Physical security. How are people allowed on campus? How is theft managed? How are things brought into and taken out of the workplace? And loss prevention. Loss prevention in the United States, which is kind of our area of focus, $52 billion lost last year as a result of employee theft. Fraud prevention. Fraud prevention and information security go hand in hand. How are people that are known to your products using your products illicitly and creating copies that may not be of the same standard or quality that the enterprise is producing? Information security is huge, and this goes hand in hand with physical security. How are you training your employees? How are employees being managed when it comes to personal devices being brought into the workplace? Something as innocent as bringing a thumb drive into the workplace, downloading work, taking it home to work on my computer at home, and then bringing it back into the workplace and uploading it, and along with it, uploading a virus. Background checks, who's working for us. So all these different things impact our risk audit, but are generally siloed within an organization, and it may not be items that a risk professional is traditionally looking for. So you have to ask the question, when you're doing your risk audit, are you supporting the enterprise by mitigating risk? And is risk aligned with the strategy of the organization? So what we find a lot is that there is no leveraging of the ecosystem or the learnings that are gained from risk. Data that is accomplished during a risk assessment is rarely repurposed into people, processes, and communication platforms. Critical communications within an organization are huge. So all these things impact process improvement efforts, continuous compliance efforts, and proactive and predictive responses to risk. When we're looking at risk from a data standpoint, and as we look to the future and we start talking about artificial intelligence and business informatics through machine learning, we can actually become predictive in responding to risk and identify risks that are on the horizon. It also helps us to eliminate duplicative infrastructure costs where different silos in the same company may be investing in similar things that are actually dual purpose. What we have found in a lot of our audits is that 10 to 20% of a budget spend in an enterprise is based on inefficiencies in people, processes, and tools. So it's not just about risk, it's about identifying inefficiency. So how do we portray this risk? This is an example of a business intelligence tool. It allows us to have information that can be taken into the C-suite and readily digested by business professionals as we start looking at the assessment process as data points. We can readily quantify, rank, and analyze the data to portray what our highest risks might be. It portrays the data for security and risk-related business decisions. So no longer are we just relying on a tool, we have something that we can consult in real time. And of course, our data is subjected to analytics. So through those analytics, we can identify pain points which we might not otherwise be able to achieve. So this is an example of a business intelligence tool. This is actually Microsoft BI that's been incorporated into an assessment, and dashboards like this can be configured according to the needs of the client. In this particular dashboard, this client is looking at overall risk, threat, and vulnerability, as well as a maturity model that's driven by key performance indicators and metrics. So this is how we can use business intelligence tools to portray risk for a client in a manner that's easily digestible. Another aspect of data-driven reports is user-defined reports when you need them. So when you have all your data residing in a single platform, we're able to configure reports to the needs of the client. And the client actually has this type of reporting at their fingertips. So they can look at a single facility, they can look at a campus, they can look at an entire enterprise, and they can view or print complete or partial assessment reports and rapidly visualize risk mitigation and residual risk. So you can see here, when we're looking at the slide on the left, we see the overall risk rating. We see the rating according to threat, vulnerability, likelihood and severity of impact of the potential threat. And then we see a description of the vulnerability as well as a recommended mitigation or risk treatment. And then on the right, we see our residual risk and what the future looks like. So this gives the client a good view and gives the client the ability to make really great decisions based on the information that they have. So this is real-time information and creates a shared understanding that forms the basis for mutual decision-making across silos within the enterprise. So when we look at risk, threat, and vulnerability and risk assessments, we're actually involving ourselves in process optimization. We're looking at the business process intersection with our risk assessment. And we get into security master planning through our risk register and the items that we've identified. So all these things on the left lead to road mapping for the enterprise, the development of a risk register and master plan, the ability to look at integrations across the enterprise and how those integrations can assist multiple aspects of the enterprise across silos. It helps us to understand enterprise migrations and where different import may be at any specific time. And it also gives us a snapshot of security risk management across the enterprise and gives us a real-time picture. Basically, a step to the future in this type of delivery model. Every risk identified leads to a master plan mitigation. So you'll see in this particular record, not only are we identifying the risk and the vulnerability, but we're also identifying the risk treatment. The risk treatment is then given a value. That value can be a random order of magnitude value, or if the client has standard design processes or has vendors that they're familiar with, we can actually put actual costs in here. These costs can be divided up and processed in many different ways, but in essence, we're giving the client the ability to establish their risk mitigation budget at the same time they're identifying the risk and the vulnerability. Additionally, the risk is not just out there and the mitigation is not out there. It gives the agency the ability to assign that risk to an individual and hold that individual accountable for accomplishing that risk mitigation and keeping the enterprise informed of the process on risk. Once that mitigation's been accomplished, we can go back into the system, we can change our overall risk rating. This particular risk falls to the bottom, and we're only dealing with the highest risks within the organization and providing a continuous snapshot of our current risk profile. This deals specifically with some of the things that are looked at in the physical security side of risk or security risk, such as access control, visitor management, who's coming into our facilities, door contacts and strikes. But I'm not going to go through all these things, but I want you to consider these things a little bit differently. In the past, these were just devices. They were generally standalone devices. At present, they are integrated devices that run on the same IT platform as other business IT processes, which means they produce data. That data can be used to inform us of risk. For example, I have an access control card which gives me access to the building. I may use the same access control card to access the IT or information security systems on the same network. But the two systems are disparate in silos within the organization. When I can combine the data received from both of those systems into a single pane of glass, what I'm now doing is I'm changing my process control from an AND gate, or from an OR gate, which is a single point of failure, to an AND gate, which allows us to have multiple points that have to be achieved before failure can occur. What does that mean? If I've not accessed the building system by utilizing my access control card, but I've accessed the IT system knows that the person accessing is not in the building. By having these things on a single pane of glass, then I have to do the second look. Does somebody have permission to access the network from outside the network, outside the building? If they don't have that permission, then I know I have a breach. This is taking two disparate systems that use the same card to readily identify an ongoing risk or a risk that may have significant impact on the enterprise. And instead of waiting several days to be able to identify that risk, we can now identify it within moments. This is the beauty of data-driven risk assessment. What we're really speaking about here, folks, is looking at a different way of doing business. This is what we call level 5 leadership. And for those of you that are familiar with business process management, you'll understand why it is level 5 leadership. So as we proceed and we go through this process of risk assessment, as risk becomes more data-driven, we're able to enter into level 5, where security and risk is seen as a strategic partner, where security and the business unit have linkage. Security is managed as a business partner. This collaboration provides improved business processes, allows for real-time situational awareness, and a strategic business plan and roadmap for resolving risk within the enterprise. And I think that's where the value in this lies, is we're no longer just speaking about risk, we're actually talking about risk as a business multiplier. So some of our learnings that we've done over the years and that we've come to understand. And this is something I often like to say. The business of security and risk is the strategy of the business. We have to start all metrics with a baseline assessment, which looks at the risk program and technology. Security and risk need to bridge the relationship gap with line of business leaders. It's not just about risk. Leadership involves cross-functional integration across all lines of business so that all lines of business understand what the potential risk is. So we start out with requirements and concept development, and by gaining this data, we are able to create functional specifications, engage in design engineering to mitigate risk, program delivery, and then we're at a level where we're at performance management, and we have an actual budget that is aligned with the strategy of the business for accomplishing risk and mitigating risk, and business thereby understands the value in risk. So just a little bit of information about our company. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. I'm sure you can look at this at your leisure. But more importantly, we have to look at what enterprise strategic risk goals are. That's the ability to perform a comprehensive analytical risk assessment. It's aligning the strategy of security and the strategy of risk with the enterprise strategy. It's about developing integrated technology solutions which minimize risk and make the enterprise aware of potential risks. It's the development of mitigation strategies to actually address risks within the enterprise and mitigate or treat those risks so that they no longer have value or they're minimized to a point that their impact is negligible. Oftentimes this requires us to do zero-based studies and look at the organization from a new view. Also, the development of this risk and understanding our risk can help us in business continuity and crisis management planning and developing plans of value that really will assist the organization in addressing potential risks that may arise. This also allows us to better train our employees on assessments, physical security technologies, and the like. With that, folks, this concludes my presentation. There's my contact information. If you have any questions after this presentation, if you'd like to get in touch with me personally, I'm more than happy to talk with you and assist you in any way that we can. Thank you so much for your time today. Have a great rest of your day, and thank you for listening.